Always curious, Professor George Washington Carver committed his life to scholarship, community, and the integration of his Christian faith with higher education. It's in this spirit we welcome you to Carver Classrooms.
Hello and welcome to this Carver Classroom course on science, peace, and leadership. I'm Joshua Swamidass. I'm a scientist and a professor here at Washington University in St. Louis. I'm also a Christian and a faculty fellow of the Carver Project. This course seeks to explore how Christians can engage with science thoughtfully and faithfully while seeking opportunities to make peace where there's conflict and lead others to do the same. So far in this course, we've looked at what science is, the pastoral challenge it brings, and how we can think of science in light of Jesus. In this final session, we'll see how we can lead by example to promote peace, even in the most difficult issues of science and faith. So, when it comes to these questions of faith and science, there is a lot of conflict here. The standard way this is approached is just by trying to avoid it, to avoid the divisiveness that's here. But there is a better way. We have to remember that in these places of conflict, in these places where people really disagree with one another and there's real divides, that Jesus really sees these people as people that he loves, that he cares about, that this is really meant to be a beloved community. Not necessarily because we all agree in that, but because there's a love for one another that we can find that is bigger than our disagreements, as important as those disagreements might be. And so when we think about this, these conflicts, rather than seeing them as merely conceptual, we should be thinking through, as leaders in particular, how to model loving people that we disagree with the most. So how do we do that? Well, when we engage with the people that we disagree with, first of all, we actually have to engage them. We have to seek them out and engage them, whether that is the people in the church that we disagree with or people in science that we don't usually interact with. Are we willing to actually seek them out, have conversations with them? And when we do, what are we going to do there? Are we going to try and seek understanding first and above all else before we worry about persuasion? This is one of the really big counterintuitive things about persuasion. When we try and persuade other people, we usually provoke a particular reaction out of them. It's a fight or flight response. Heart rates rise. People actually flip into a particular physiological mode where they don't actually think, and they're less willing to change because they perceive a threat. And so it actually makes it so when we try to persuade people that we're right, it makes them less likely to be persuaded. The most persuasive thing that we can do is to back off from trying to change people's minds and instead just try to say, hey, I understand that there's a disagreement here. I want to understand you. And are you willing to understand me? And for those of us that find ourselves in really strong disagreement with things from mainstream science too, my advice is to follow Proverbs. Above all else, to seek understanding. Maybe there are things to reject in science, but if we're going to reject something, we can understand what we're rejecting. we can understand it really well, because understanding something doesn't mean that we actually agree with it. And so there's an opportunity there to really understand, even if you're convinced that a person is really, really wrong on their science or their theology, to really understand why they're thinking the way they do, and then to be open to the extent that we can of realizing those places where we're wrong. I mean, one of the weird things about being wrong is that, how does it feel to be wrong? It feels exactly like what it feels like to be right. Of course, finding out that you're wrong about something feels pretty crummy, but the reality is when we're wrong about something, we don't know that we're wrong. And so it feels exactly like what it feels like to be right. And so how do we have any hope of actually being able to self-correct and make sense of things? Well, we can't really do it on our own. It's really as we engage in that beloved community, that people that God loves, and so we're trying to love as well, to hear what they have to say, even when we really disagree with it, and then to take it in and wonder, maybe they might be right about this part. Maybe they're wrong about that, but maybe they're right about this. And that's the sort of thing that as leaders, if we want to lead across these divides, it can't be with the false hope of convincing everyone to agree with us. It can only be as we kind of lead across these divides, trying to model, not that we have all the right answers and that the big problem out there is that there's some sort of deficit of knowledge that people have, but rather to build trust by loving one another, by trying to understand and being willing to adjust, even to change. If Jesus sees science as a community of people that he loves, he certainly sees the church as a community of people that he loves too. We often have some of our biggest divides with people in the church, and certainly with science too. But if we remember that these are people that are loved by God, that we're meant to try to love too, we have an opportunity to really lead across these divides in a way that doesn't actually demand agreement. It isn't contingent on agreement, where we can find the type of peace that is bigger than our disagreements. When I think about that postdoc who was curious about Jesus and went to a church that told him he couldn't follow Jesus if he believed evolution was true, he went back and forth. That pastor could have still held on to his rejection of evolution. He still could have thought that evolution is false. But how much better would it have been if he could have also said, even if we're confused and disagree about origins, Jesus is still good. You can follow him. And in fact, there's some diversity in the church. I disagree with these Christians, but there are Christians out there that actually think that evolution's true. You can still follow Jesus faithfully. Jesus is greater than our disagreements. He's greater than science, and he's greater than all of these things. The diversity of the church is often a source of conflict, but it can become one of our greatest strengths. So in this course, we've looked at what science is, what the pastoral challenge of science is, how to think about science in light of Jesus, and how we can lead across the differences that science surfaces. If you want to learn more about peaceful science and seeking peace in science, you can learn more at peacefulscience.org. And thank you so much for participating in this Carver Classrooms course. If you'd like to learn more from the faculty fellows of the Carver Project, check out our other courses at carverclassrooms.org. Carver Project founder John Inazu's course on confident pluralism provides some further insight on how Christians can effectively and faithfully lead across differences. I hope you continue to seek understanding, not only in the realm of science, but in all things as you explore God's world. Thanks again for watching.